I work in the 10 state parks throughout the Florida Keys in both marine and upland ecosystems. So I do a lot of work with coral reefs, a lot of work with seagrass beds and seagrass restoration, which is all part of trying to protect the coral reefs. Unfortunately, there are a lot of stressors that corals and coral reefs have been subjected to over many, many years. Certainly human impacts, just the cumulative impacts of people being out there recreating. Most dive shop owners, I think, work towards trying to educate the public in making sure they don't stand on the coral, making sure they don't touch the coral, but it does happen. And so you have this cumulative impact of just the physical damage of somebody bumping up against coral. And coral is a colonial organism which protects itself by secreting a mucous membrane over top of the whole colony. And they retract into that calcium carbonate substrate when they're not feeding. And so most people look at them and think they're just pretty rocks, and they're not. It's a colony of animals. What happens when there's physical impact is that mucus secretion gets wiped away, and then it leaves the coral subjected to disease, bacteria that can actually get into their tissues. There's also an increased number of boaters out on the water, and unfortunately, one does not need to have a boating license in order to be able to operate a boat in Florida. And so the Florida Keys are such an unusual area to navigate around. There's a lot of shallow seagrass beds, a lot of shallow coral reefs. And if one does not understand how to read a navigational chart or how to read navigational signs, then they will just potentially go all over, and there's the potential for a boat grounding. And boat groundings can be severe. It can be something as small as the propeller hitting up against the coral and gouging out the coral, or it can be something as severe as just killing off the whole coral colony. And corals, especially the boulder corals, are a very slow-growing organism. So when you have something that's taken hundreds of years to grow and can be killed off in a very short period of time, that's very significant. There's also the issue of water quality. Of course, we're close to islands. We're close to inhabited islands, and so the runoff from those islands, nutrients from the islands making it into the nearshore and the offshore waters, that's problematic for corals. Higher sea surface temperatures are certainly problematic for corals, and in 2010 we had a cold spell that lasted 6 days, and the water temperature decreased to a level that was beyond the coral's ability to be able to handle, and we had major die-off back in January of 2010. Corals have a very narrow parameter that they can handle as far as temperature and salinity. They definitely need a lot of sunlight, and they need clean, clear water. And when those conditions aren't there, then the corals and their symbiotic zooxanthellae, the algae that lives within the coral tissues, become stressed. And so there's multiple factors that are issues that we try to deal with in trying to protect our coral reefs.